What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Rough Draft Podcast. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm here with Cameron Selby. Cam, first time on this podcast, our third episode, period. I'm very excited about today because we are doing our first mock of the year, and we obviously know nothing. We have not seen free agency. We have not seen any of the movement on these teams or even the coaching talk. So it's all speculative. We're hoping to, get some of these right, but we're not expecting to get a bunch of them right. We're going for the position over the actual player most of the time on these, and of course some of these teams will address those positions over the free agency.
Yeah, and mostly, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. It's pure speculation. This is just a fun introductory of just the names, the people, what they could possibly be looking for. And obviously this is going to completely be flipped on its face 1 month from now when free agency starts, and all these big needs that we see that obviously need to be addressed. Oh, well, they picked 2 tackles up, so they probably aren't going to tackle, et cetera, and so on. So all kinds of things like that, and then and trades along the way. At least this year, last year was like the first draft in many, many years that all 32 teams had picks, and we got to talk about every single one. Well, there was multiple trades where multiple firsts went the other way, so there's like at least 3 teams that already at the very moment do not have picks going into the first round this year until further notice. So it'll be fun to break them down at a later time, but basically focusing on how we see the board, I guess.
At this point, yeah. Yeah. Actually, there's 4 teams that don't have a first-round pick.
Teams, yeah.
The Colts, Falcons, Packers, and Jaguars.
Colts were the 4th one.
I do want to point out some things before we get into this because I think, I do love doing these, but this is a completely different year. This isn't the greatest class. Talent is lower overall, and so that's not always going to, reflect. Some guys are going to go higher in this draft, and maybe in other drafts they would have gone much lower. Example, offensive tackle, left tackle versus right tackle. You have some upside things. It's going to be a bunch of flavor, because there's some offensive guard versatility and stuff like that. And then, scheme fit, of course, and things like that. So this is our opinion plus opinions of the industry's best that we've seen. I'm kind of taking some of their stuff, a lot of our intuition in how we think these teams might go, and then also, coaches' fits. Because we have a lot of new head coaches. That's a big, massive story that we're going to get into. 10, yeah, exactly. So coaches' fits and how those players might fit better in certain schemes or just stylistically. And of course, we're going to have our guys that we think are going to be risers as we get closer to the draft versus guys that we think may fall down a little bit on these lists. So it's going to be a big culmination of a lot of things. And this, of course, like we said, is just the tip of the iceberg, and we're going to get into it much deeper as the offseason goes on. So let me pull it up. We're going to use PFF's mock draft simulator.
So kicking off this first mock, obviously we are going to start with the Mr. Raider fan. And this one's not as much of a secret as the previous year, like Cam Ward. First off, was Tennessee going to stay there? Then were they going to take a quarterback? Then which quarterback? And then we kind of had an idea around our third mock that we did, for sure who was going to go there. But now I feel like this is going to stay the same, more likely than not, throughout the entirety of the offseason. But spoiler alert, let us know who the Raiders end up going with.
Yeah, shout out new head coach Clint Kubiak, just winning the Super Bowl. Hopefully that he brings some love and we win some more games. We're going to start off, obviously. I just want to point this out. If you just look up here, there's 7 needs. We need every position. It's not even it's not a question. We need everything. But yes, we will be going with the quarterback. Hopefully we can start, I guess, at the most important position in football. With Fernando Mendoza. That's not really a conversation piece. I think it's the fact that can Fernando Mendoza work with all the holes that we currently have on our team? Can Clint Kubiak come in and help with Fernando Mendoza not basically fall apart like we've seen some of these other quarterbacks in the past? Fernando, I think, is actually a pretty pro-ready demeanor. Hopefully, and we need that in Las Vegas, but hopefully he's ready to take some beating because I don't know that we're ready this year to play that well. It might be a thing where we are a couple years down the road, but I hope that with the amount of money we have in our cap space and bringing guys in, we can finally make a push for the playoffs. We're in a very hard division though. That makes it, on top of everything else, that makes it tough.
Well, at the same time though, we've gone through 3 straight drafts, being Houston, then Washington, then New England, where there's a not just worst to first, but worst to contender, and Washington hitting the championship for the first time in 30 years. The Patriots most notably being the runner-up in the Super Bowl. And so with over $90 million in cap space going into the offseason, this roster is complete overhaul other than Brock Bowers, Genty, and most likely Max Crosby, hopefully for your sake. I have no idea who is going to be on this roster other than Fernando Mendoza being the future of this franchise, but it would do them a lot of good to do a lot of these 1 year, maybe spend $1.20 on the dollar for these guys like Milton Williams and all these guys that the Patriots did last year, for example,
Right.
to just make sure that he is not set up for failure, because like Cam Ward went through a lot and had a lot of rough stretches this past year. Even though you saw those flashes, you don't want to set your young quarterback up when he is starting day one, more likely than not, with complete just shock value, because this is all of a sudden a position where we are very impatient now with whether or not we let you go forward with the gig.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing with them, is just it's an unknown other than knowing more likely than not who's going at number 1 overall in this draft.
Sure. No, completely agree with you.
Yeah, but on the Jets, the other hand, similar ordeal of just complete overhaul expected, another one with a ton of cap space, they're the only pick actually in the top 6 with the same head coach this year. But at the same time, they need a lot on both sides of the ball, but they did a bunch of just tearing it down, and they're ready to start building back up. So who are we going to go with Aaron Glenn's number 2 overall pick in this draft?
Yeah, they're not in the offensive tackle market, and there's no quarterback here, so neither of those positions, those big positions that we normally talk about at this point, and other drafters have talked about early in the draft, they just don't have those needs. Or they have the need at quarterback, but they're not going to get the answer, maybe, is what I meant to say. But it's between 3 guys. To me, they only had 26 sacks in 2025, which is not very good. And I think it was bottom 3. And the answers are David Bailey, Arvell Reese, and Ruben Bain. That's it. One of the 3 should be on this team. It's basically pick your poison. We talked about flavors earlier. You can get David Bailey, who's the freak pass rusher. He's just a pass rush expert. You can get Ruben Bain, who's just a disruptor, or you can get Arvell Reese, who's got the versatility and just possibly the most athleticism in this class, just freakish ability to do things. And that's where I think they should go. I think they should go with Arvell Reese. That's who we're going to pick here, because I watched that game against Texas in the first week, and I was like, who is this guy? He was just so special out there on the field. He did that all year. I know that he didn't have any sacks after like week, 8 or whatever. Everybody wants to talk about that, but they did not rush him. So, I mean, what are you going to do when you're not actually a blitzer? So, this guy is legit. Arvell Reese, they're going to be going back to that 4-3. He can play any of the inside linebacker spots right now, and he will develop as a pass rusher. Him and David Bailey are the best 2 pass rushers in this class, and they, by metrics, 23% pass rush pressure per snap rate. Like, these are the guys. And Arvell Reese is my favorite because he has that versatility.
Absolutely. And versatility is the name of the game, and you just definitely want an anchor on the defensive side with the Jets just completely stripping it down to the studs. The one concern I have, just because he is labeled as a linebacker, I know he can do more, but just because of the fact that the top linebackers in the drafts, at least that we've done when we went back to doing mocks in like 2019, like some of the top in the class that we just were like, I don't see how this guy fails. More often than not, these top 10 linebackers, top 10 overall pick linebackers, just for whatever reason, it just does not hold up like we thought it would.
Right.
You know, namely these Devin Whites and Devin Bushes, and even Roquan Smith took a while to get there. And I know they weren't in the top 10, but like Kenneth Murray, I had no intention or inclination that he would be a failure in the league, and he just absolutely can't play football. And I don't understand it, but it's a thing. So picking a linebacker at 2 overall is kind of tough, but at the same time, like he feels just as safe as it gets up top, but with the upside as well.
If you're going to draft Arvell Reese this early, you think he's an edge. Like, I don't think you think he's a linebacker. I think you think he's an edge that can play linebacker. And so I think a lot of people are saying, oh, no, he's a linebacker that can play edge. But if you're drafting this early, it's the opposite. And so that's kind of where I'm at with him. And I believe that he could be a great edge. I think he's just got so much physical ability. So that's where I'm at with him. He's not like last year. He's not like Micah Parsons. Everybody wants to compare. He's not that guy. But he's a different type of edge rusher, and I'm excited about him.
For sure. Yeah, and then now going over to another GTD members team, going to the Cardinals. Another head coach regime change. Mike LaFleur, Matt LaFleur's brother, is coming in to take over the reins for Arizona. And they, we actually liked their draft a lot last year. They the top players for their class dealt with a lot of injuries throughout the season. So we think that they can make a leap next year. But the thing is, they are in one of the toughest divisions in football, so they do need to have some answers. Once again, quarterback is not here, but you also don't know if the Kyler Murray, more than likely to move on, is actually going to take place now that Mike LaFleur, maybe he would just not prefer to vie for a bunch of backup quarterback bidding on people. So who knows, but they do need to make some changes and make some upgrades, and there's obvious need that we think. What is the pick for this pick?
So there's actually a few positions that they need, but this is actually a pretty complete team overall if you just look top to bottom. I think they have a lot of players. Of course, they could get better at spots, but I think they have like average players that you could say, hey, like let's put those guys out on the field and they're not going to kill us. I think this is the first spot you could actually talk about possibly putting Sonny Styles at. I do think they need a linebacker, but we're not going to do that. That would be even crazier than Arvell Reese because we just talked about it a little bit. But it really comes down, in my opinion, to the right tackle, whichever right tackle you have is your favorite. Let me pull the tackles up real quick. It's either, Noah or Fano. I'm actually higher on Fano. Fano is actually higher ranked on our big board, but it's real close. And so you pick one of the two. Maui Noah finished the year so strong, and I think that that's probably why you're picking him here. We're going to take him here. He can also play guard if they decide to, if they get a right tackle and they're like, hey, we'd rather you play guard. He could move into guard. Both of these guys could actually. So that's something that I think is interesting, that versatility. Jonah Williams on his last year of his contract, and he's always been injured, so I don't know that they're going to go back to that. And so that's kind of why we're looking at this. Maui Noah, though, just so everybody knows, he would have been behind Josh Simmons, Armand Mimbu, Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, and none of those players went top three. Sorry. Will Campbell was the first one to go, and he was number 4 to New England last year. So I just want to put that out there because I think that that's really important to show the difference in how good this class is versus previous years.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the similarities of New England. Like you mentioned, Will Campbell infamously is just absolutely getting shitted on by the community and the public for his playoff performances. Granted, he was very, had a big injury, came back early, and he just never got his footing literally, throughout the rest of the year. But, they're kind of boxed in a corner. There's not really anybody that is going to be trade up viable. Right. And so that's what New England was last year. They didn't want to stay there. They wanted to move back. And they had no suitors. So at the end of the day, they're boxed in a corner, but they have to upgrade the offensive line. Really, Paris Johnson's the only guy that is a mainstay for certain there. And they just need to make some changes. So Maui Noah is the guy we went with. And then translating to another new regime with Robert Saleh having his second go-around as a head coach now with the Tennessee Titans. A lot of changes expected from them because they really disappointed us based on we didn't expect the roster to look as bad as it was last year. And so they definitely have a lot of needs. But they do at least have the quarterback position temporarily figured out as long as they're going with Cam Ward going forward. So how are they going to help out this roster, Em?
So you just said, you kind of alluded to it a little bit. They could start by going with wide receiver 1. They could go with, Jordan Tyson, or they could go with Carnell Tate. If I narrowed it down to players, it's literally wide receiver or edge in my opinion here. Maybe cornerback, but I don't know that that's my favorite spot. It's a little farther next round or something. It's a little deeper in the quarterback class too. So for me personally, I think Robert Saleh loves his Will McDonald type edges. He always has one. He's always gone and drafted, or when he was a head coach at the Jets, he got to draft one. And I think that's what he'll do here. I think he'll go get David Bailey. If you think about David Bailey, he's just the pass rush specialist in this class. I actually think he could be a DPR, which is so annoying. I do not love designated pass rushers as top 10 picks. That's just, you have to be able to play the run in my opinion. But at the same time, this isn't that deep of a class, and I think it's an opportunity to get one of the players that really impacts your team. Even if he's not going to impact it on first and second down and help stop the run, you're just going to have to find other guys, veterans, that can do that, because I think you get such a big, flashy player when you get Bailey, and hopefully he continues his dominance at the NFL level for the Tennessee Titans if that does happen.
Yeah, and Robert Saleh, I've always admired him as a DC, and I'm still jury's still out, obviously, if he can be a head coach.
Right.
But he also went to one of the worst situations with a owner that basically put all the blame on him for why that super team they tried to build was a failure, and he was absolutely not the reason, or even the close to the primary reason why that Jets' success or lack of thereof did not work out. But Tennessee, most cap space going into the offseason, complete overhaul similar to most of the teams above them. But like you said, he loves these types of edges, and there's a lot that they need to improve, and that could be a guy that really helps propel them in the right direction.
Right.
because they have a wider gap than we anticipated in one of the weaker divisions. But yeah, the Giants, another team, interesting because of the fact that they are very young, decent roster. They were very competitive, especially at the end of the season, in spite of a bunch of injuries on the offensive side of the ball. But John Harbaugh now going over there, that was one of the better coaching hires, or one of the premier names at least on the market. So now rounding out the top 5, how are the Giants going to move forward with this roster?
Baltimore always played the run the ball and play good defense, and I wonder and I hope that he brings that to New York. You obviously have Scadaboo, and you love how he runs the ball and stuff like that. I think the positions of need are wide receiver, offensive line, and cornerback. I don't know that they're glaring issues at all three, but I know that the right side of the offensive line needs some help. Illuminor is a journeyman playing right tackle for them. He is gone after this year, things like that. So we narrowed it down. Talking about possibly Fano being the right tackle here, if that was an option. We talked about taking wide receiver. It could have been Carnell Tate or Jordan Tyson, because both of those guys opposite Malik Neighbors. Tell me Jackson Dart wouldn't be so dang happy if he had Scadaboo, Carnell Tate, and Malik Neighbors out there. That would be insane. So that was a fun thought, but really what it came down to is we needed to take corner here. A lot of big mocks have taken Mansour Delane here. I'm actually not going to take Mansour Delane. I think that Jermod McCoy is the best cornerback in this class. And a lot of people aren't going to put him higher than Mansour because he was injured and he didn't play this last year. Well, he was capable of playing in like week 10. He decided not to because he didn't want to re-injure it, and he didn't want to have to deal with that if he was going, because he expected to go to the draft. And this is when he starts on week 1, it'll be 20 months post-injury. And I just don't think, he's going to test. If he tests well, he is going to be perfectly fine as cornerback 1 in this class. It'll be 20 months post ACL tear. I think that is enough time of recovery. I believe Jermod McCoy is the cornerback 1, so I do think that Jermod McCoy will be, in this case, a New York Giant.
And he would have fit right in with last year's class, because we really liked the corner class last year, and everybody was coming off an injury essentially.
Yeah.
But the difference, like you mentioned, a lot of them were missing these, workouts, combines, pro days, and all that stuff. Well, because he's been so far removed, he's actually going to test. So I don't think that the ACL injury will possibly drop him as much as you would think it would. So we're just going to take the stand with, hey, they need a corner, and we are convinced that we like one more than the other. And so if we're convinced this guy is going to be a riser, we're just going to go ahead and be a little early, because we have a knack for doing that.
I mean, yeah, we're trying to predict also, and I think that being early is important, especially with this type of stuff, because we're going to see, these guys go up boards. We actually have Jermod McCoy number 4 on our big board, because if he is healthy, he is number 4 on our big board. That's basically, how it goes. Like, that's just like Jordan Tyson. If Jordan Tyson is healthy, he's number 5 on our big board, because if they don't have those injury history and that injury situation, they're both going to be really high.
Yeah, and then that rounds out the top 5. Going on to number 6, once again, another coaching change in regime. This one of the more dysfunctional ones, to say the least. Their head coach search probably was one of the more comical stories throughout the season, or at least the early offseason, when they're trying to do like quizzes and tests on people.
Yeah,
and then Jim Schwartz leaving because he thought he'd be internally promoted, and they ended up going with Todd Monken. He ends up bolting despite them wanting to keep him. So who knows what's going to happen with them. But they do need to make some changes and do some things. Quarterback, I don't think the public and Twitter is going to make you think that they have it figured out, or at least they know what is going to be the case going forward. That should not be the thing, and if it is, then good luck to Browns fans this upcoming season. But regardless, they do need a lot of upgrades. How are they going to do that with this 6th pick?
Well, I think the biggest upgrade they need is obviously they were the number 2 defense or number 1 defense in the league, just depending on what stat you went with, because they basically were on the top 2 of every stat. So we're not going to go there. We're going to go on offense. Offensive line is an option, and wide receiver. You could get Shadur, a number 1 wide receiver, opposite Jerry Jeudy, and really help him in that way. Or you could protect him because he holds the ball too damn long. Whichever one you decide, it's fine. But we're going to go with offensive tackle here. Now, Tyler Conklin is a 2028 unrestricted free agent. So Tyler Conklin, sorry, Jack is a 2028 unrestricted free agent, and I'm a little bit more weary of the left tackle side than most people for some reason. Cam Robinson was like one of the worst offensive tackles in football last year, And DeJuan Jones is injured, and I don't know that he's good, and he's on the final year of his contract. I just don't think that doesn't feel like a good like confidence thing. You could pick either side. You could go with Fanu on the right side. You could go with someone else on the left side. We're personally going to go with Caleb Lomu, which is going to be a shock to most people because if you look at current boards, he's not nearly as high. There we go. But I think that Caleb Lomu will be moving up boards. I think he's a guy that's going to move up boards. He's one of the climbers that I see, and Cleveland needs to Shedeur if he is going, or any quarterback that they play. And I think this is the way to start doing it. Caleb Lomu is a very young player, but he's shown that he can play as a pass blocker. He's a true junior, but he has a high ceiling, and it's basically your flavor of choice if you want to go with the right side, his teammate from Utah, Fano, or if you want to go with Caleb Lomu on the left side.
Yeah, and obviously this could possibly draw some controversy or some discussion, but that's okay. This is a complete unknown, and we don't care. Like, nobody has Lomu going in front of his teammate Fano right now. I mean, I'm just looking up at a another mock, and he's all the way down to the late 20s. And so it's just like sometimes we know like what's going to happen, and we're just trying to predict because there's a big just cluster of just a bunch of solid second round-ish guys.
Sure.
And there's not a ton of true first rounders. And so this pick 7 or 6 even on is just going to completely cause chaos if people are, and they're just going to try to find their guys. So we're trying to make things work and take stands on guys we think could be risers, like you mentioned. And Lomu is definitely one of those guys for us.
If you think you know about what's going to happen in this draft, you don't know. No idea. Because even in old drafts we didn't know, but we could get the first 3 picks right. This is the only draft where we're going to get the first pick right, and everything else is going to be a question mark. That's all I'm saying.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah, like last year was when we compared our final mock to the results of the actual draft, and that was like one of our lower since we started our podcast in terms of accurate picks or accurate positions that they targeted. Well, this year we're going to feel so unconfident, but we're ironically going to have our best year just because we're just going to start throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks. So
exactly.
But moving on, this is one of the teams. Of course, every year there's a team that just playoff caliber team that just gets absolutely shit on by injuries, and Washington was that team this year. 3 different injuries to Jaden Daniels, so many injuries on the defensive side, and just it completely fell apart. And so this is going to be a very interesting offseason for them because you just want to see what was the good year a mirage? Did they just catch lightning in a bottle? Or this last season where they just went back to being, one of the worst teams in the NFC, is that just more of the same going forward? So, but they are one of the first true wild cards in this certain spot because we can start having those fun conversations and picks. So with that said, Commanders, what are we doing?
I feel like there's been 10 different players mocked to them. The difference is most of the time the player that we're going to say isn't on the board. You could make a case for Caleb Downs or Sonny Styles here. They're number 1 and number 2 on our big board. You could make a case for them to go second to get us a wide receiver because there's still the top wide receivers on the board if they fall in love with one. But we're going to go with edge. Ruben Bain is normally gone at this point. He's number 2 by PFF. He's not that high on our board, but hey, look, this dude's legit. I have some question marks. Obviously, with every edge in the draft, I have question marks because there's not just there's not any that are just completely put together. Ruben Bain's obvious glaring issues are his short arms and his size. Maybe he's not a true normal pass rusher, but he's a good football player. And guess what? Washington needs good football players, and their edge position is really scarce. Dorrance Armstrong is the only player signed through 2026, and he's a free agent after that. There's just I just think they have to go with some sort of edge defensive end spot because of that.
Yeah, and it's like you said, there's not a lot of people having him last this far. If weird stuff starts happening where a couple offensive linemen come off the board earlier than normal, that's a very viable thing to where these good players can fall into Washington's lap, which is exactly how you can turn things around really quickly. So Bain is one of those guys. His name keeps on being announced and jumping off the board when you're watching him on the TV screen, and so that's a big get because all of a sudden this was once one of the deepest defensive lines in football, and all of a sudden it's just one of the worst, and it happened just like that. So they really need to build this around, turn it around. They used to have 4 first-rounders all on the starting defensive line, and it's time to just kind of revamp that a little bit, especially with Dan Quinn.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan Quinn as the head coach, and he loves that defensive side of the ball. So the Saints, another team, they kind of impressed me, especially on the back end of the season, because they were very in a lot of games, and they were very competitive. Tyler Shuck was the best rookie quarterback overall by default, almost, nonetheless. But they have some interesting ways to go. It's a still weird roster of a lot of old vets and a lot of really young guys, and now it's starting to kind of go into being a young team. Kellen Moore, offensive guy, as you know, and they want to have a little bit more firepower going forward. So how are we going to help with this Saints rebuild?
Well, I do think this could be a spot where defensive tackle 1 could come off the board. We're not going to do that, but Brian Breese's been awful. I don't know if you want another Clemson defensive tackle, though. That just sounds like a bad recipe. Whatever, not the point. So we're not going to go at that spot, though. Jeremiah Love is one of the guys that I think I see a lot mocked here, just because he's an explosive guy that can catch the ball in the backfield, and I think that just, makes, people feel good that they have another part of their offense. But I personally think they should go with a wide receiver here. Jordan Tyson, if he is healthy, he is the most gifted wide receiver in this class. I think that he is the only guy that is a true wide receiver 1 takeover type of player. I love Carnell Tate, but I think he's truly a wide receiver 2, but an insanely effective one. He's the safest wide receiver to me, but I don't know that he's ever going to be a true wide receiver 1. I don't think he's going to challenge for top 10 wide receiver in the league. I think Jordan Tyson can do that. And so we're going to go with Jordan Tyson because I just think the upside is insane. I actually have a buddy that's a Saints fan. He told me that he didn't want a wide receiver because he thought Kellen Moore was that guy. And I was like, I also think Kellen Moore is that guy, but I do not think Jalen Polk is that guy. So let's upgrade the Jalen Polk part.
Like we've been 2 years now through the Saints picking guys up off the street to be like, well, I guess we're picking this guy this week because
right.
Chris Olave is either out or just ineffective. Yep. But at least Chris Olave for the most part was healthy, especially in the ending stretch. He was a big league winner or a millionaire maker in the best ball streets. But he does need somebody on the other side of him. Offensively, they were one of the most potent offenses, obviously with us growing up, and that's really fallen off in recent years. So I don't know if Tyler Shuck is the quarterback of the long-term future, but I know he's the quarterback of now, and the best way to make the most out of that and seeing if he's your long-term option is building an offense to where he can really thrive and to where if it is not successful, we know where the problems lie.
Exactly. Agreed.
So going on to the Kansas City Chiefs, the fall from grace because we're used to picking them at the very, very end of these mock drafts, but no, they're number 9 in this draft. A lot of injuries, especially Patrick Mahomes, who tore his ACL in December, and so they have some needs and some ways to go. So defensively got really thin all of a sudden with letting people walk and go, and offensively, really stagnant, and they just are missing the explosion. So they could go on both sides of this ball, but what did we ended up deciding for them?
So there's 3 options. I like giving y'all some ideas of options and stuff. Defensive tackle is the non-luxury pick here, in my opinion. I've actually seen Caleb Banks, who did that? PFF, I want to say, put Caleb Banks to them, which is fun. I really like it. I think Hayden McDonald probably makes more sense, but that's just me. But we're not going to do that. A right tackle of the future makes sense to me. I think if you were to go, hey, let's put Spencer Fano on this team, and let's let him play guard, and he's going to take over for Juwan Taylor, who is overpaid. That was a terrible contract. I didn't hate the idea of him going there. We talked about this a bunch, but I did not like the contract. The contract was so expensive. Well, guess what? He is gone in 2027. I do not believe they will bring him back. So why not, maybe pick his replacement? That's an option. But truly, there's the luxury pick, and the pick that I think they'll probably end up making is, let's take Jeremiah Love, add that element to our team that we've been missing for years, add some explosiveness, and take that win now mentality and just be like, hey, let's go get a running back. Let's go get a guy that can help Patrick, not have to just sit back there and throw the ball every play and let teams drop 8.
Yeah, and he's never really had the bell cow running back. I know Isaiah Pacheco was fine and fun during his year before, especially before his injury, but he was just a guy that had no other competition for touches. So they really need to upgrade this room. It would benefit, especially coming off an injury, Patrick Mahomes having some kind of run game, and it was just absolutely non-existent for the last year and a half plus. So the Chiefs definitely need this. I really wish that instead of picking CEH, 6-7 years ago, that they actually picked Jonathan Taylor, because that just would be so fun.
Game changer.
Think about that. So, and they won in spite of that. But now that they're back in the dumps and they're back no longer in a tier of their own atop the AFC, they need to do the work to get back up and be respectable to where they can be considered a contender again. And that is one way we think can do that. That said, they currently dead last in cap space, negative $55 million right now. Obviously, that is going to be moved around, a lot of that stuff. But they're just going to get really thin really fast. That could maybe just be the unsexy pick coming out here. But for the time being, we need to fix this offense and help Patrick Mahomes in the best way. And we think that Jeremiah Love, who's in tier of his own as a running back in this class, can do that.
Don't overpay Jawan Taylor, and you won't be in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel.
That is how the cookie crumbles. But rounding out the top 10, Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, this is probably a defensive pick or an offensive line pick, because their offensive line is awful, and they still have been awful, even though they've tried to fix it. Their defense, they have not tried to fix it, but it's still awful. So, how do you even decide where they go in this direction? Because they actually are number 1 and 2 on the board, or on our big board, are still falling to 10.
So BPA-wise, the two options are 2 Ohio State defenders. You can see both of them here, Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs. This is the worst graded and hardest team to watch when it comes to defense. They're losing their best pass rusher in Trey Hendrickson. Their linebackers' highest PFF grade was 40.2. So basically, you have to go defense. Their number 1 overall pick last year, Shamar Stewart, missed most of the year and had no sacks, which we kind of expected because he had 1.5 for 3 years in college. So let's go with the best football player in the class, and that is Caleb Downs. And I know that Caleb Downs isn't going to fix all the issues, so don't come at me in the comments and be like, they should have done this. It's like, they should have done a lot of things before this. Okay, we should not be here is what the problem is. So Caleb Downs at least is the most versatile player I've seen. I love what he does. Number 1 player on our big board. He can just do so much for your team, and that's why I think he makes the most sense. It's not going to fix this team just because you pick Caleb Downs, or this defense because you pick Caleb Downs, but it's at least a step in the right direction, getting good football players on your team. Sonny Styles, if you picked him, I would not have been mad at you. I would have been perfectly fine because the linebackers aren't good, but they did pick 2 linebackers in last year's class, so that's why I don't think they'll do that.
Yeah, they did it, and those guys somewhat did okay. And it's like, I know their defense was bad, but like, somehow it could have been worse. Like it's not like they played as bad as like their talent level is. Their talent level is one of the worst overall defensive rosters in the league, if not the worst. And they haven't been the worst defense, at least for the later stretches of the season when Joe Burrow returned. But yeah, big upgrades needed. They just need to go defense for every position or every pick in this draft. Similar to a couple teams, their specific units are so bad that they just need to go bam, 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 bam.
We'll have some of those. We'll talk about some of those guys,
so,
yeah.
But moving on to the Dolphins, possible new quarterback, possible with all this new changes going around with this franchise organization, took a big step back. We saw it coming. Writing was on the wall. We were just a year a little bit early, but it was, or half a season early, really. But AFC East all of a sudden, it's just kind of 2 elite teams up top, or at least contenders up top, and then 2 just bottom feeders.
Right.
How do they find a way to get back into the thick of things?
Well, don't forget, they also are another team that got a new head coach, Jeff Hafley, the previous Packers defensive coordinator. What I will say is it's really hard to be good when you're paying your quarterback 18.5% of your cap, and he has not been good. So hopefully, we'll see how they fix that. I mean, he is signed through 2029, though. Questions with Tyreek continues, of course. You have the injury and stuff. So I think how we would do this is either you go corner, because we've seen them go corner in the past, and of course, Jeff Hafley has done that. So maybe Kenyon Sadiq could be an option. But really, I think it's Carnell Tate. I think they need a number 2. High-end number 2 opposite Jalen Waddle, give them something, the field stretcher, the length, the 0% drop rate, and the finisher at the catch point. Like, give them anything, jump ball guy down there, and give him a chance because, we are actually lower on Tate on, like, where he went in this draft, but, a lot of people are mocking him higher than this, so he's just so safe. So why not give him a safe player to at least, for whoever the quarterback is, throw the ball to?
Yeah, and This will be very interesting because obviously Mike McDaniel's offense was just kind of one of one in terms of how he does and runs his offense. And so this is going to be a big scheme change and just definitely a look because like we saw Devon Achane running routes and fade routes to the corner against linebackers and stuff. So you're not going to see that as much of that anymore. You need things to extend the field and play. I don't think Tyreek Hill is going to be a Dolphin again, whether that's going to be him being released or traded or just if he's going to be the same from his injury, because that was a very gruesome injury that he has to recover from. And Jalen Waddle, he's fine, but he does need another running mate. If he is by himself, like he can't really do it all alone. So definitely an upgrade there. And obviously they have other holes and needs to go. So if they went any other position, there's very rarely we're going to have a confusing pick where it's just like you don't need that because they do need a lot. So, but going on to the Cowboys, polarizing team, of course. 2 first-round picks this year, both 12 and 20. Kind of a similar mind because they had one of the worst defensive productivity seasons in NFL history.
Yep.
I think they were the 4th worst DVOA of all time. And so they need a lot of stuff. And how are they going to do that? It could possibly be a fun pick.
So the offense wasn't the issue, like you said. I think the Pickens news will be very interesting this offseason. But they will be picking defense, most likely for both of our picks. I don't know. We'll see. But, it's like that you basically could see any defensive player mocked here. They've done Downs, Delane, Hood, Falk, Styles, whoever, etc. They've done it. Every single big mock has a different name, basically. Best fit defensive options and fits, in my opinion. If you do go edge, it's like Falk, Messidor, Young. All 3 of those guys can play that outside, that 4-3 defensive end. And then you could also go with like the cornerback because we still have Mansour Delane, who a lot of people have higher than us personally on their boards, and Colton Hood, who I believe was mocked by Dan and Jeremiah here. So it's options, but we're gonna go with the number 2 player on our board, Sonny Styles. We're gonna go back to back Ohio State players. Number 2 rated player on our board, like I said. Dallas has multiple, just guys. No one's a stud or impactful, and I think that you get this guy in there. He's got the coverage ability because he played safety. He can go sideline to sideline. Multiple guys I wouldn't want on my team are already on the team, so maybe we can cut some of those guys out of the picture. But at least I will say, at least the linebacker position for Dallas is really cheap, and so they can build around it by getting Sonny Styles.
Yeah, and this would be a big win because, again, he's number 2 overall player on their big board, and he fell all the way to 12. So it feels like this has been a common selection if they have not been in the playoffs over the last several years, is that they're right around 10th to 12th, and they've landed a really, really impactful player. So Sonny Styles would be a big get, and they could plug another hole in the next few picks, depending on how aggressive they want to be to address this side. So going to the Rams, though, NFC title game, almost made it all the way. MVP of the league, Matthew Stafford, already announced that he's returning this year. They're one of the best contenders in the NFC overall, and they have a top pick because James Pierce, they didn't want to select a late first rounder last year. They added one from Atlanta, and so they get 2 first rounders this year, the first one in 13th overall. How are they going to help themselves and stay in contention in the NFC?
This team is so good at drafting. They haven't had a first-round draft pick. They had one first-round draft pick in like the last 10 years. So now they have 2, which is cool because we don't really see that, and they're really good at drafting. The only first-round draft pick they had was Jared Verse, and look at how great he's been for them. They don't have a ton of needs because they draft well in the back part of the rounds too. So I think biggest needs would be, of course, backup quarterback. We don't need to do that yet, I don't think. Corner, they need to upgrade the corner room for sure, and then right tackle. I don't know, and we had this conversation a little bit, but I don't know who's going to play right tackle. I think that you can make a big upgrade because Rob Havenstein is going to be gone. The backup that did come in, McLennan has actually played really well, but I just don't know that he's a starting caliber right tackle for a long time. And when there are guys staring you in the face, the conversation me and you had, we disagree on very few picks. We normally are like, hey, let's talk about what positions, and then we go from there, and we can kind of, sort through. This is one of the ones where we were going back and forth a lot because the debate that I had in my head was which offensive tackle can I take here, and then which cornerback can I take later. So basically it's Fano plus corner, right? And I liked that pairing more than I liked Delane plus Caden Proctor. Didn't feel good about that. Or Blake Miller. So I just felt better about this pick being offensive tackle and then getting a corner later because I think the corner class is actually deep and I don't think the offensive tackle class is. So we went with Spencer Fano. Getting a right tackle that is just an upgrade, and he's versatile. He can play guard. He can play 4 positions on the offensive line except for center, and I think that that's so big because we have seen injuries on this team. A couple of years ago, they started the first 8 games with 5 different lineups, and so I think that that's really important to get guys that are going to be on the field and adding versatility and depth, and then also a starter for the future at right tackle.
Yeah, and once again, a big value. Like you mentioned, I think you said you like Fano more than Malinois.
I do.
And on top of that, he's going a lot of mock drafts right now in the top 7 or 8. So getting him at 13 is a really solid get. The one thing is they do have 2 firsts as of right now, but they have been one of the most, not the most, or one of the most, but the most aggressive team in terms of blank them picks or just trading back, and I don't want to do anything with it. So that doesn't mean that they're going to be trading down from here or even from 29. But I think that's a very big possibility. But if we're going to paint the picture right now that they are picking both of these selections at 13 and 29 respectively, the combination, like you said, that argument made a ton of sense. And so with that said, that's why we ended up going with the tackle that ended up falling to them instead of reaching on one and then going to the other. Because if they ended up going corner here, Mansour Delane is still there, and that wouldn't have been a problem for either of us,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, the Ravens, another team with a new regime, at 14th after being a true contender this year, Super Bowl bust, and it was a big bust. So they end up losing the last game of the regular season to miss the playoffs and end up with a coaching change for the first time in a decade and a half. And so now they have to figure out how they're going to get back into contention, similarly to Cincinnati and Kansas City. So with that said, how are they going to do that, Em?
So Jesse Mentor is a defensive coordinator prior, so I think that mentality is going to bleed over because I do think maybe their biggest needs are on offense here. The guard position is what I really am like, hey, we need to address this maybe twice in this draft, but it might not be here. We don't have a guard that makes sense here, so we're gonna not go guard. But I think that that's a big position. I also think a wide receiver opposite Zay Flowers. They've tried this twice in the first round. They did take Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman in the first round. Unfortunately, they probably need to do it again. It just might not be in the first round. They could add edge, but at the end of the day, I think it's a defensive tackle because he fits the most. He fits, in my opinion, what they want to do. It is going to be Peter Woods. I still believe in him as the DT1. I've seen him drop boards, and it's just been crazy to me. Of course, he's falling down boards. Clemson was not good. I get it completely. But at the same time, Peter Woods has some insane versatility to move from head up nose all the way out to 5 technique, and he did it in multiple years. We've seen him do it. It's not like I'm just making stuff up. So I would like to believe that Peter Woods, as a athlete and things like that, just has the most upside of all the defensive tackles. And I think that this is a pretty, maybe not a big value, but a really good player in a lot of players that, you're just kind of questioning upside versus floor. I think Peter Woods has both of those things, and that's why I think he's a great picker.
Yeah, it's just not a sexy pick. It's not going to move the needle in terms of just ratings or just hoopla or anything like that. But this was a preseason top 5 or 6 pick going into the way too early mock of last year, and him being available at 14. It was just purely he didn't have his best season in his final season in college, and on top of that, his team wasn't contending like we thought they would. Both of those reasons why he's fallen out of the top 10, and he's just kind of there. And I don't think he's going to be one of the picks that wherever he falls, it's going to be in this range or possibly even lower. And we're just going to be it's going to be one of our more well-liked and respected picks, what I would think going into as we, go further along in this offseason. Tampa Bay, another team, middle of the pack. It was very disappointing because I thought they had a true path of not necessarily going to the Super Bowl, but a contention to be the 1 seed because the schedule was there, obviously the worst division of football, and they let it slip away to where not only did they not make the playoffs and win the division, but it just feels like, man, what do we do now? Because the other teams are all getting better, and all of a sudden we could just be going from first to worst within a couple years after just going so many years in a row winning this division. So, how are they going to try to turn this right this ship?
Well, they have a lot of needs. As you can see, they actually have 5 needs by PFF, which is a lot for PFF. for teams that I think, maybe you expect to be better. A tight end, Kate Otten is going to be a UFA this offseason, so he could be gone, injury history, and, couldn't develop, hasn't developed, continue to develop. But they have interior offensive line needs. Yeah, Hassan Reddick was not a great edge, and he's going to be UFA, so he'll be gone most likely. Linebacker, we've been trying to mock linebacker to them forever. We wanted them to take Jod Campbell last year. I think it would have helped. Of course, I'm not going to bash Emeka Egbuka by any means. He was great. Cornerback, there's so many positions that they could take. Well, we're going to make them go ahead and take the first and only tight end on this list. I will, spoiler alert, but we're going to let them go ahead and get some Kenyon Sadiq in their life. I think the upgrade, athleticism, game changer, mismatch nightmare he's basically added to this wide receiver room, and he's more of a wide receiver type, but he is a really effort blocker, and he gets after it. I think this is a great way to get like an H tight end next year, like Y tight end, which is like your, I guess if Payne Durham plays your Y pretty much, and so you can get a guy that can run routes while Payne is in there blocking.
Yeah, and this is a team that they need to kind of reassess how they're going to go forward with this offense, because ideally Baker's the guy of the future, but other than Emeka Egbuka, who they invested in, that it didn't feel like you really needed them. Like really quickly, they're aging fast. Mike Evans is a free agent. I honestly don't have a lean one way or the other if he's going to be a Buck next year. If he is, cool, but it's not going to be because it's a long-term expensive deal. It's because he signed for a bargain because he wanted to end his career there. Chris Godwin, multiple significant injuries over the last few years, and he had a re-aggravation last year, turning 30 later this month, and so Kate Otten has just always been okay. Their running back room is just okay, and so they need a playmaker. And we've seen a lot of young tight ends really make an impact early. Think Harold Fannin, think Sam Laporta, all these guys, Brock Bowers. Yeah, I could go on and on of these young tight ends just completely taking over the NFL right now. So they really need one of theirs to just keep on going. And I think this is an exciting pick that can help things.
Yeah, the hoopla. This is the hoopla pick. You were just talking about the Peter Woods pick isn't going to be that exciting. Well, Kenyon Sadiq is going to be like, oh, okay, guys. All right. I see what you're doing. So
right. Yeah, hopefully it just doesn't turn out like O.J. Howard did.
It might. You never know.
Yeah, but going forward, we already talked about them, the first of multiple teams with 2 first-round picks. Jets are here at 16. Obviously, still a lot of needs. How did we end up addressing the second pick?
So our first pick was Arvell Reese. Got that edge / linebacker for the defensive side of the ball. I think the biggest thing here is like sooner or later they're going to have to help their offense. Now, they did bring in A.D. Mitchell and they did bring in John Mechie from Houston, so they at least tried for the wide receiver spot. A.D. Mitchell was really good at times. When he did the whole, he dropped the ball in Indy and stuff like that, and truly he was never a good fit for Indy. I don't know why they took him when they had such a deep receiving core. Like, give the man a chance, right? Well, at the Jets, I think I'm excited to see what he does, and let's get another guy next to him and Garrett Wilson. I think that John Mechie's fine, but I want to improve that a little bit, and we're going to give them Mr. Mekhi Lemon, who's at the top of our board here. Mekhi is a power slot, basically. He's going to be your slot receiver that kind of can play outside when you want him to. I mean, they were literally throwing fades to him at USC last year. So this gives you an opportunity to get a guy that is just, how do I put this? Like, he's really prepared for the NFL, in my opinion. He's not necessarily the most athletic guy in the world or anything like that, but he is a really good route runner, contested catch player, even for his size. Like, and he goes and blocks. Like, he does all the things. And that's why I think this really fits. And being next to A.D. Mitchell and Garrett Wilson is going to be a lot of fun.
So one question I do have, because it sounds like he profiles a little bit, maybe size-wise it's a little bit different, but Luther Burden was a guy that you were really high on, and obviously was a big, strong end of rookie season, and ended up being their best skill player towards the end of the year. How does he compare if they are both in the same class? Like, do you have a lean on one or the other? If this is a need that they need, the Jets need. Both are available. Do you have like a comfortable lean, or are they both kind of neck and neck in how they can impact the NFL level?
I'm higher on Luther Burden. I think he's a better athlete. He's more explosive. He's got all those athletic tools that I don't think that Mekhi Lemon has. And a lot of people want to tell you that Mekhi Lemon has these like great tools. I don't see it the same way. I think with him, he's just such a good football player that it kind of overwrites all that stuff that he's kind of lacking on the other end. He's not big. He's not like super like fast or anything like that. He's not quick. He's just really good at understanding angles and leverage and things like that to get open. While Luther Burden, like with the ball in his hands, you were like, hey, we need to know where that guy is. You know, like if he catches the ball, we have to get him down now or something could happen. And we've seen a little bit of that with the Bears. We saw it a lot on his 2023 tape at Missouri. I don't think that the athlete that Mekhi Lemon is what Luther Burden is. But I do think that Mekhi Lemon is a much more natural football player than Luther Burden is. I think that he is almost like the clean cut guy. Like you're never going to have to worry about anything. He's going to do the right thing on every play. You're not going to question his effort and stuff like that. With Luther Burden, you might question some of those things, but the athlete and the upside that you get with Luther Burden is so much higher.
Mm-hmm. Got you. So let's go ahead and move on. Very solid 2 gets for the Jets. One team that did go from first to worst after back-to-back division crowns is the Detroit Lions. Kind of a culprit of just being in the best division in football and then just losing out on tiebreakers and not taking care of business at the end, because they would have been, on paper, one of the biggest contenders to come out of the NFC, and they ended up not making it entirely. They could easily turn it around. They do have some holes, though, that need to be addressed. Where are we going with this pick?
This one's a pretty easy one, in my opinion. After we figured out, okay, it's not easy if there's a big question mark. So basically, Tyler Decker reports possible retirement after Frank Ragnow suddenly retired. And then you also mentioned to me that he might be a cap casualty in general. So I thought that was interesting. So that might be a spot we go. We might say, hey, we got to get a tackle because Tyler Decker is not going to be there. And that is just, that is one of the most important positions in football. You have to get a good tackle. But if that is, there's so much speculation, I don't necessarily want to just put it on that. So we're going to go to a different position. We're going to go to a guy that's been dropping compared to maybe his consensus rankings on most boards. And that's going to be Mr. Mansour Lane, who's at the top of the board right here. Terry Arnold, I mean, he just hasn't lived up to the pick, and we weren't as high on him. He was closer to like the Kool-Aid McKinstry area than he was like the Cooper DeJean. But neither here nor there. And then Ennis Rankstraw, one of our other favorites in that class, he can't stay healthy. He missed all of last season, so he just can't stay healthy.
He got injured really.
So Mansour Lane is kind of going to be that fix-it guy, and we're going to get him in there, and hopefully he can help shore up that defensive backfield, basically.
Yeah, there's certain teams that just over the last several years that we've done these, we just keep on putting the same position to the same team, and it just feels like every year we're just like, Detroit, you need a corner.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's injuries or just mispriced signings via free agency, they just still have not figured the position out, and that was one of their sore weaknesses, especially in the back half of the season. So one that is arguably corner one on a lot of people's boards that is going up much higher than this right now. Falling to 17, I think, is a good get for somebody that could immediately turn around and be one of the best teams in the NFC next year. But going on to their division rival, the Minnesota Vikings had a little bit of growing pains, especially with J.J. McCarthy, but on top of that, they just couldn't stay healthy at quarterback in general. It didn't really matter who it was. It had to be a rotation throughout the entirety of the season from week 1 on. So that was a little bit of a down year for them after a 14-win season themselves. Again, they can turn it around really quickly, but they have some holes to plug. Where are we going with this pick?
So I think of the biggest ones. I don't know that I think they have a ton of holes, and that's always nice. But the ones that kind of stand out are cornerback and safety. They need to get defensive backs, in my opinion. Harrison Smith, he may be signed for a few years, but he could retire at any point, in my opinion, because he's 37 years old. And then the big question is, how are they going to address this? Because I do think, I think Rodgers is going to be their starter on one side, but it's going to be how they want to play Byron Murphy. If they say, hey, I want Byron Murphy at nickel, well, then you're going to take an outside corner. You're going to take someone that can play true outside corner. But if they're like, hey, we want a versatile, we want to be able to play both these guys at outside corner and nickel, maybe they take a different guy because they want Byron Murphy to be able to play outside. That kind of thing, that versatility might be good. But we're going to go with Colton Hood. Colton Hood is much lower on this board. They have not updated, it looks like. But Colton Hood is Tennessee's number 1 corner this year with Jamal McCoy out. So he is going to be he's actually one of my favorite corners. He's very just natural, and that's going to be really good. And I think he's really versatile corner also, but he can play zone, he can play man. They play a lot of zone at Minnesota, but I think he's just got really natural instincts, and I think this is a great fit for his scheme build.
And again, this is a guy that we're picking out and solidifying that could be a big riser, because right now he's like an early second rounder, maybe late first in some, and we've got him going. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think Jeremiah had him going 12 to the Dallas Cowboys in his. So, yeah, he's got some buzz at least. He's not just some guy I'm throwing at the wall. But, yeah, he's got a little bit of buzz. So.
No, yeah, it's not like there's no buzz there. But basically, again, there's not really a consensus, especially in this part of or section of the draft. But we're just trying to gather information because it's a lot of volatility. And on top of that, you mentioned off air how just all over the place Daniel Jeremiah is compared to our big board, which I know he does take his stance of his own, but just it feels like it's even more this year than normal. So I do think it's an interesting scenario because of the fact that Delane, who is a top 12-ish pick, falling to 17. This could be a scenario where if we were playing GM, Minnesota could try to jump over to get a guy they want if they really have a preference. But at the end of the day, like, they do solve a need, and I think that's what matters here.
Yep, absolutely.
So going to Carolina, the surprise team that damn near took out the Rams and ended up winning a playoff game. But 19th overall, had a really fun season, and this is going to be a big telltale of, was that a mirage, and did they just win by default, or can they actually build on this and do some stuff? Because they have a lot of young, fun players, and I think they want to try to add to it here.
Yeah, they could almost go every position on defense, in my opinion. Inside linebacker, safety, all those things. They tried to fix some of them a little bit, but I think, you could kind of go any position, including even edge. But we're going to try a player that maybe isn't getting enough love. And I actually had a fun conversation with a guy with my Caleb Banks versus Caden McDonald take. I have Caleb Banks higher than Caden McDonald, but there are certain teams that are going to like Caden, not Caleb. I apologize. Caden McDonald more than they like Caleb Banks because of what he does. He is a nose tackle, true run stopping, just the best run stopper in this class. And I think that, that's perfect for what the Panthers want. So they're going to take Caden McDonald. They're going to get another defensive tackle next to Derek Brown and just try to plug the middle and make the other teams throw the ball and just do those types of things. And I think they're going to be really good if they do stuff like this.
Yeah,
make this type of pick.
You're going to have to throw on them to win if that's going to be the case, and you're going to have him paired up with Derek Brown, who's just been an absolute plug in the middle. But yeah, they did spend a lot of free agency money on guys in the front seven last year, which we kind of questioned a lot of the value of that, but it at least worked out enough to where they were a very frisky defense throughout the entirety of the seasons. But going on to Dallas, second pick of this first round for them. I know you did mention a couple names that they could take at 12 that are actually here. Do they go with that name, or do they have a little bit of fun?
So you could make the case that they could go corner. And we've actually talked about this a little bit. They just had so many injuries at corner, and you kind of alluded to that. You don't really think that is the most important position for them because if they are healthy, maybe they're better off. And I agree with you. They were very decimated in the back end.
All five active corners were injured going into the start of the season.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, if that's the case, maybe if they can be healthy this year, they'll be okay. So we won't go that route. I think some people are doing that. I think we're gonna switch it up, and we're gonna actually go with my guy. I think this guy's gonna climb up boards. He's gonna be one of those guys that you're like he had a great Senior Bowl. I'm so sorry. He's a young guy that's trending up. He had a great Senior Bowl. He had a great year. He's one of the best run defenders at the position by far, in my opinion. And he's really upgraded as a pass rusher. So we're going to go with Zion Young. And I don't even see this man because they hate him, obviously, at PFF. Zion Young is 24th on our big board, I believe. But he is, and Mel Kiper said this, but he is going to be a certified first rounder. There's no way he's not going in the first round. So we're going to do it early. We're going to put him to Dallas. I told Cam that we're going to pick one of my favorite guys to Dallas because it's his team. And this is him. He's an absolute stud. Well, I have him much higher than other boards.
Yeah, and again, we're trying to make stands and read the room of just where we trend guys going towards. So him going in this round or going this early right now seems far-fetched, but this is a guy that, like you mentioned, is a big riser and could really go with stuff. I think this is a position where we don't know what their favorite guy is going to be, but you have a good feeling of them attacking defense both ways, and you just probably going to get the position right, and then you're just crossing your fingers. You end up taking the stand of getting the right guy that they end up selecting.
Right, exactly.
Moving on to the Steelers, though, very interesting roster that is now going to a new era of football now that Mike Tomlin is no longer the head coach there. Going with Mike McCarthy now, who is has Pittsburgh ties. Very old roster, and they need to get young really fast. It's not like they have a ton of holes, but they need youth and they need depth. So how are they going to approach this 20 pick?
Luckily, their offensive line's pretty young, so I guess that's nice.
Other than, yes, because they basically hit that like 3 of the last 4 years.
Yeah, they got some really good mid-rounders a couple years ago that really helped them and stuff like that. But Pittsburgh, in my opinion, is either going to be the so Ty Simpson is the question mark, right? Like we don't know where he's going to go. I don't believe that he's a first rounder, but at the same time, like, it's a quarterback and quarterbacks are taken earlier than they should be. So he's the biggest wild card in this whole draft, in my opinion. He could go 16 to the Jets if they decide that. I don't think they will. I think they'll wait till 2027. So is Pittsburgh going to be that team? Well, we decided not to go with him here. I think that Mike McCarthy's really trying to get Rodgers back, and if that happens, sure. And then also you have this situation with Will Howard, if Will Howard can step up and be that guy. So we're not going to go there. It's wide receiver to me, and you can pick your favorite wide receiver. My problem is I think a lot of people want to go Denzel Boston here. I think it's actually the most obvious mocked player to team, and he doesn't fit to me. No. They have DK. He's very similar to that. I have him much lower on our board, and I have Mr. Casey Concepcion much higher. So I think Casey is just so explosive and so good with the ball in his hands that I would rather have him in an offense that needs that, because I don't think I just want another DK on the other side. I don't think that Denzel Boston is as good as DK either. I think he's more of a jump ball guy, and I think a lot of people are trying to paint him as better than he is because this isn't a very good class, and that would make sense, right? So we're going to go with the guy that I have higher. It's Casey Concepcion. He fits better, in my opinion, and gives you a little bit of juice.
Yeah, and that's kind of what they're missing, the style of receiver at least that they're missing, because Roman Wilson he missed basically his entire rookie season due to injuries, and I think he was healthy scratch toward the end of the season, or he wasn't even on the field, let alone Calvin Austin has been too inconsistent. And so they need to find ways to get better, because they can't just throw it to Kenneth Gainwell 8 times a game. Like that just can't be your offense. So need to find ways to get better. And Casey, I think stylistically just complements DK better. And right now you're boxed in the corner because you traded a day 2 pick and extended him very highly last year. And you just at least got to try to find a way to make it work. And so, yeah, I think that's a fun way to improve this offense. And then we'll just see what they do at quarterback. Like you mentioned, reuniting of Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers definitely would be a story. I don't know how relevant that would be in the contender realm or picture, but at the end of the day, it would still be a worthy talking point.
Right.
Going to the Los Angeles Chargers, we mentioned that Jesse Minter is no longer the DC there, but they had a really solid year, and it just feels like they couldn't really reach their potential because they're 2 best players offensively almost got hurt and didn't play basically the entire season, and it really showed at the end of the year. Justin Herbert absolutely got wrecked, and they just have to stay healthy. That's been probably their problem, at least on the AFC side of things. They've been the cursed team over the last several years, keeping guys healthy. Joey Bosa was one when he was there, Khalil Mack and others. So how are the Chargers going to try to improve this roster?
So yeah, like you stated, both Slater and Alt season-ending injuries, and they just had Justin Herbert running for his life. But defense was actually pretty good on the other hand. They were top 5 in yards per game and top 10 in points per game. So that's not really something I think they should, go to. I really think they need interior offensive line, because so it's kind of funny. The offensive tackles got worse, and they were the same level as the guards and center at that point. After their backups came in, that was when everybody was about the same level. Because Mekhi Becton had a 37.1 grade. Zion Johnson, who I think is fine, he'll be a starter, had a 56.5 grade. And then Bradley Bozeman is literally the most hated player on the team. So I think adding interior offensive line is the way to go. There's 2 options. You can either go Vega, who everybody wants to go, Vega Ione, or you can go Emmanuel Pregnon. I've seen the question mark is, of course, everybody wants to put Vega here, so we're not going to, because that's not fun. It's too early in the process to be following, right? So we're going to go Emmanuel Pregnon, and I think that the moving fees and stuff like that from Oregon are a little bit better than from Penn State. I also know that Justin Herbert is an ex-Duck and stuff like that. I do also have Pregnon higher on our board. So that also makes me feel really good about it. So we're going to go Pregnon. He actually fits their offensive scheme in that outside zone, and with Alts and Slater, outside zone killers, and then they'll also have 4 first-rounders on their offensive line. Hopefully that's enough to, and then of course, staying healthy, but hopefully that's enough to keep Justin Herbert upright.
And Omarion Hampton.
Oh, well, him too.
So,
yeah.
Because he also
There he
was
is.
one of our favorite running backs last year. But going on to the Eagles, the Super Bowl 59 champions that fell from grace, and I had a feeling, and I just didn't know how it was going to happen, and it just imploded on its own like it has when they've tried to defend Super Bowls in the recent years. So they always draft well, though. They always find a way to have somebody either fall in their lap, and it's just like, how did we let this team get this guy? Is there a situation like that right now?
I think it's close to that. Their biggest needs, you could go offensive tackle here and get Lane Johnson's replacement because he is old and he's had injuries, or you can go and get another edge corner like you have been every single year. That's probably what they'll end up doing. Jalen Phillips was a rental, and he was a fun rental. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think they'll bring him back. And if not, they need to add somebody that's better on first and second down than Jalix Hunt. Jalix Hunt is a really good pass rusher, but he is a sub-average run defender. So I think that would be good, is getting an edge here. The edge that of choice would be TJ Parker, and TJ Parker is a guy that is ready to play the run at a very high level, and being opposite Nolan Smith is going to be really fun. So that is my favorite pick to them, and that's where we're going to go. I just think you take the talent you add to the pass rush room, and you continue drafting the way Howie Roseman drafts. That's just what they do.
For sure. And like you said, there's some chances that they're going to lose some depth, especially on the defensive line right now. And, it's a team it's not an aging roster, but they're just naturally just going to age out for contracts and not going to be able to extend the guys that they want to, and they're not going to have the depth. So it's just a way to retool and reload, and they're once again going to have one of the best defenses in football, but just do they have the capacity to not beat themselves? And that's going to be the interesting talking point throughout the rest of the offseason.
Yeah.
Going over, next up, though, on the board is the Cleveland Browns with their second first-round pick that they received in the Travis Hunter number 2 to number 3 pick swap that they did last year. Very interesting way of going about things, but they do have some needs. Do they end up going to help out this offense this time?
They did it the first time. They got Caleb Lomu in the first one. Now they need playmakers, and I think that is where they will go. I think you alluded to it a little bit, helping out their quarterback. Obviously, it's hilarious that one of their needs on PFF is quarterback, because everybody else is going to tell you that they're good to go. And I also agree with PFF. But at the same time, there's no quarterbacks in this class, so let's go ahead and get Shadur a new weapon. The weapon is going to be a guy that is different than the rest of the receivers on the team in Denzel Boston, and I think he's a much better fit here than he would be to Pittsburgh. So let's go with Denzel Boston. Denzel Boston has some hype that he could go top 15, and then he has hype then he has the opposite, and he might be top 40. So there's a lot of question marks with him, because I think some people see him as a possible, and including myself, I see him a little bit as like a Keon Coleman. Maybe not the mental part of it, but like just the jump ball. Yeah, it kind of resembles, but
very limited.
Yeah, exactly. But he will be, the wide receiver too, no matter what, because he's better than Cedric Tillman, Isaiah Bond, or Malachi Curley.
So let me ask you this. I know you did mention that we weren't as high on him as others might be. Is there a receiver, because this is a position that a lot of people want to jam in receivers at the back half of the first round, and a lot of them end up not panning out. Is he a guy that you consider maybe the biggest bust risk in this tier of wide receivers?
Yeah, yes. If we're talking about this tier, I have him like almost, I think he's like 35th on our big board, and he's going to go a little bit higher than that, but the problem is he's got such a high ceiling and such a low floor, and it just scares me, because I've watched. I am a Florida State fan. If y'all didn't know that, that's why the colors are the colors they are. And so Florida State, Keon Coleman came out. Keon Coleman disappears in games. I don't think Denzel Boston really does that as much. I think he's a little bit better than Keon, but at the same time, I am not comfortable taking him, in the first round.
Gotcha. So let's go on to a team that did turn around. We weren't wrong about the Bears. We were just a year early, because they ended up just having such a successful second year with Caleb Williams at the helm. First year with Ben Johnson, it was A+ with how it could have turned out. Winning the division like they did, the comeback in the playoffs, damn near almost coming back a second time against the Rams and losing in overtime. A lot went right for them, but they still, obviously, they were a flawed team. There's a reason that they had to keep on coming back and winning games the way that they did at the very end.
Yeah.
Because they didn't set themselves up well. Is there a specific guy in mind that you just really love here that really bolsters this roster?
I was actually kind of surprised that they only have 3 needs and they're all on defense. I thought, I think they had more than 3, and there's another one on defense. I think, you could look at offensive tackle being a need because I think, Braxton Jones, and I've shouted to the heavens for this, but you could upgrade Braxton Jones anytime you want to, and you'd be fine. He was injured this year. He's just okay at football. I think that, that could be an upgradable position, but they have done so much on offense that you might not need to do that. Cornerback, safety, I think you could both. DB is an option, but defensive tackle I think is the biggest need. They have not been very good at defensive tackle. They have, Grady Jarrett, I think is who it is, right? That's there, and then Gervin Dexter from Florida. I think they should go defensive tackle here. Now, we had this conversation in the I know. We had this conversation in the comments on the last video, and a lot of people, and the guy was talking about how Caleb Banks and Gervin Dexter don't are the same player. Well, I agree. I don't think they should take a Dexter 2.0. I think what they should do is they should go Lee Hunter. Lee Hunter's a little bit shorter, has better leverage, and will also be a guy that has an opportunity to just wreak havoc on the defensive line. I think they need that. I think they need a guy that can wreak some havoc in the run game and then also get after it on the pass game. He's not going to be like a big sack guy, but he will push the pocket and do a lot of that stuff. So that's why we're going with Lee Hunter. He also has stacked so many good back-to-back games in the Senior Bowl and then also against Oregon in the playoffs. So,
yep, stacking weeks and stacking games. At the end of the day, this was a very below-average front seven for the most part. But the thing is, they were creating turnovers and stuff like that. So they do need a solidified piece that they can't just be one-dimensional and rely on just, hey, we're going to give up all these yards, but we're going to luck into some TOs. So fun way, and like you said, it's a different style of player to add another dynamic to this defense. Going on to the Bills, another team that feels like they kind of just missed an opportunity this year in the AFC. 26th overall, their defense really fell apart. Like they just 3 years ago were just one of the scariest, deepest defenses I can remember, and then all of a sudden it just doesn't feel like any of that's there anymore.
Right.
How can they improve this team and just stay on top of things?
Well, they did get rid of their head coach. They do have a new head coach in Joe Brady. He was promoted from offensive coordinator. Maybe he's really the reason they're winning, and it wasn't Sean McDermott, but that is we're going to see. Their biggest needs, in my opinion, are the edge position, the linebacker position, and the safety position. So you just hit it on the head. Like they have issues all over their defense. And then, of course, you could say wide receiver, but they just did that, and they are not good at picking wide receivers.
They're not. So
there's that. To me, edge is the biggest one. They have multiple 2026 unrestricted free agents. So Larry Ogunjobi, AJ Epinesa, and Joey Bosa. So I don't think they're going to be bringing all those guys back. Maybe one. And they really need some depth opposite Gregory Rousseau, who's also been injured at times. So I think that's the position they go with. There is a guy that we haven't really talked about so there's 2 guys I think that we could take here. It's Akeem Messidor out of Miami, who is just an absolute havoc wreaker, or Keldrick Falk. And I think someone will take the upside of Keldrick Falk. So we're going to do that here. Keldrick Falk is not even, he's like what? I wrote it down because I had to. He had just turned 21. He will just turn 21 prior to draft night. If you don't know, Gregory Rousseau was 20 years old basically when he started his rookie season. So they like taking these young guys. So maybe they continue doing that. I also want to say on top of all of that, Mr. Rousseau actually had 15.5 sacks while Keldrick Falk only had 2, so that's a little bit different. But I think the upside is just insane with Keldrick Falk, and that's why we should take him here.
Well, like you mentioned, he was really young, and it took him a while to get there. He wasn't just immediately just out the gate impressive and productive. Right. And on top of that, he was just one of the many depth pieces because I think he was like 3rd on the depth chart for most of his rookie season. It wasn't because of bad play. It was just because there were so many good edges. So he finally came into his own, had his breakout season, and now they need to add to it. So definitely a selection that is just a while. It's a high risk, but definitely could be a high reward for one of the younger prospects of the first round. Going over to the Niners, 6 picks to go in this first 1.0 mock. The 49ers somehow made it to the divisional round after all the injuries that they they dealt with on both sides of the ball. Ironically, the only guy that stayed healthy was Christian McCaffrey, who everybody wanted to avoid because of injuries himself. I don't know if it's a curse. I don't know what happens, but this roster is really decent. We just didn't see the whole picture of this team, but they could definitely find a way to improve it. How are they going to do that?
So they're gonna, okay. So Shanahan's a magician. Getting this team to be as good as they were this year, I mean, that was
Best
pretty
coaching
impressive.
job ever. And he's been to 2 Super Bowls. That was his best coaching job ever.
And yeah, he did some insane things with all the injuries they had and stuff like that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about the positions they need. Obviously, wide receiver, Brandon Ayuk's not coming back. They also lost Deebo Samuel a couple years ago, and they need help because I don't think Ricky Pearsall's that guy. They could go edge because Nick Bosa can't stay healthy, and Michael wasn't that great, underwhelming. But I don't know that that's the position they should go with. I think it's offensive tackle, and this is because Trent Williams is 38 years old this season. He is a 2027 unrestricted free agent. I do not believe they will bring him back unless it's a one-year deal. And Colton McKivett, he's been fine on the other side, so maybe he will be a long-term option for them. But let's get a guy that I don't think is ready. I think should have gone back to school, but has so much upside. As their pick, it's going to be Mr. Monroe Freeling out of Georgia. Right. Oh my gosh, get my mouse right here. He's going to be able to play both sides and be the swing tackle that they like having because that's what Colton McKivitz was before he got the starting spot. And I think that they're building for the future. That's how you do it. You get guys at important positions and let them sit for a year and give them an opportunity to get ready to play at a high level.
Yeah, and they did have forget the name is slipping my mind, but they just lost the previous offseason a swing tackle for a lot of money. I think he went to the Titans. That they really relied on the previous year when Trent Williams was out, and so now that they didn't have him, like you just can't rely on Trent Williams of all things. I know he's a Hall of Fame player, but he's just up there in age, and it's just a year to year at this point. You don't want to keep on playing that game because it will bite you in the end if you don't have a plan B for that
exactly.
spot. So
exactly.
Definitely like that. And wide receiver they're going to have to figure out because Brandon Ayuk has divvied himself out of football apparently. Don't know what is going to happen with that. Juwan Jennings did a trade request diva thing himself. Ricky Pearsall hasn't stayed healthy for 2 years, and all of a sudden they have no wide receivers other than George Kittle, who just tore his Achilles. So it's all weird, and I don't know what they're going to do offensively, but I trust based
Shanahan.
on the way they've done that in the past. So moving on to Houston, they had such a Super Bowl caliber defense and just had a bad draw and a very, very bad offensive performance in the postseason, but they had a really, really exciting season. I did not expect them to stay as a contender like they did. Maybe it was just not expecting their defense to be stepping up even more in 2025. But yeah, they have a lot of things to do. Maybe attacking one thing 5 times might be the approach with this team. But what do you think about the Texans?
So Houston's defense, like you said, is not the reason they were on vacation. It was definitely the offense. But so they will be attacking the offensive line because, wow, it's bad. So basically, in my opinion, there's, you could either say, hey, like go get tackle and sure up the right tackle spot and put Titus Howard at guard for the rest of his life. But you pay him way too much money to do that. But you could do that. So you could go with like a Caden Proctor here, or you could go with the Blake Miller, whoever you are more comfortable with. I do think, though, that I think Titus Howard should go back to right tackle. And the best way to do that is to take one of the best offensive linemen in the class in Vega Ione, who played at Penn State playing guard, and just plug and play guard right now. And you're very happy with that pick. If you're a Texan, there's good chances he won't be here because a lot of people are mocking him higher. So he fell in our mock draft because that's just how it happens. And he goes to the Texans, and I think you should be happy. And now Titus Howard can go play tackle instead of guard.
Yeah, once again, another unsexy, but just not a sexy pick for anything, but this is exactly what Houston needs. They just need to improve this offense. Run game just was non-existent. I think Woody Marks had 13 carries for 13 yards in the divisional round. Like, they just could not move the ball at all. It wasn't just C.J. Stroud being awful, turning the ball over. So that was the issue most of the season. And, don't expect this to be the only lineman that they target in this draft. Once again, the Rams are on the clock. We alluded a little bit to the approach that we were doing after the first pick. They went with Spencer Fano. How are they going to go with this selection here?
So, yeah, it actually worked out perfectly. I think that they got the better option at corner plus the fall of the tackle They're going to go with the best corner that's left on the board, and I'm going to show you all the corners real quick because I really like Keith Abney. He's going to be right here. A few spots down. And Brandon Cisse is one of the favorites as like in the big analyst world. Avion Terrell, ranked 19th, still there. So we're going to go with Avion Terrell. He is a nickel, most likely at the NFL level, though he can play outside. I think this is the Sean McVay and their defense. They do so many good things with how they use their players in so many different ways. And Avion Terrell is a perfect chess piece to be putting on a team like this. You can see it from how they're going to have to replace Kobe Durant at safety. Well, they also have Cam Kitchens that doesn't even start right now. He plays safety and in the nickel at times. Quentin Lake plays safety and in the nickel at times. Avion Terrell is going to play corner and nickel at times. Like, it's going to be one of those things where they're just going to have guys all over the field, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that he makes this team better, and it gives them another chess piece to be able to run whatever defense they want because they're so good. They are so good at football. They draft well, and they're good at football. And they got another guy to fall.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any big winners of this hypothetical draft happening, it would be the Rams because they got 2 value picks that people are just drafting higher than where they ended up falling in this draft. So a really good secondary pick. Who knows if they'll keep them both, but either way, they improved their roster a ton for both of the directions they ended up going. And then the final 3 we go. Denver coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Yeah.
Had a dramatic overtime win over the Buffalo Bills and then announced that their quarterback broke his ankle and they just didn't get a fair shot in a snowstorm of all things at the very end of the season. But nevertheless, you called it, nailed it on the head. Once again, your bold prediction of them being the 1 seed came into fruition. Defense was awesome. Their offensive line is still awesome. Sean Payton is still awesome. Everything's awesome around Bo Nix, and I expect them to be right where they were last year, hopefully getting right back to having a fair shot at it. But nevertheless, what are they doing with this selection?
So, tight end is an option here. I think that they could add a tight end. I don't think that Evan Ingram is, he's just a receiver. He doesn't block very well. So, but I've never really felt like Sean Payton was that guy that wanted that. So, and there's no tight end here, so we're not going to do that. I think linebacker is important here. You could see a linebacker here. I think, C.J. Allen is going to be a guy we really talk about, and I think Josiah Trotter is going to rise boards. He's Jeremiah Trotter's little brother. So I think he will go up boards, but I don't know that they're going to do that. What we're going to go with is we're going to go defensive line because you can always get more defensive linemen, guys. That's always an option. And the best defensive lineman on the board is going to be Caleb Banks. He really fits here. He has pass rush upside. I don't know that he is always going to have to. In this defense, they have so much depth that I don't know that he's always going to have to be on the field on those rundowns. When he kind of gets washed and stuff, he's going to be able to play where he can pin his ears back on third down and get after it. And then also develop a little bit more than some of the guys that are question marks on just upside and skills like he has. He'll get more time to develop, especially in a defense like this. So I think he's a perfect pick.
Yeah, and once again, this would be fantastic for this defensive front. They were already awesome and had a lot of depth before, but this would just help even more. And Caleb Banks was a guy that you mentioned that you would consider him much higher if you were a GM on one of these teams and needed an interior defensive lineman. So definitely a good get and definitely strengthens an already big strength for this team. Now let's talk about the final 2 teams, which are the representatives of the Super Bowl that took place yesterday, and that is the New England Patriots starting at 31 overall. Obviously had a very big eyesore of a problem at the very end of things, but they definitely maxed out the first-year plan of a Mike Vrabel regime. First year going from worst to Super Bowl runner-up is something that nobody called, and at least kudos to them for that, albeit it was a somewhat easier path. Regardless, they still do have some things to go. They can't just assume that they're going to stay here at the top. So how are they going to do to keep it, I guess, at the top of the AFC?
Yeah, Vrabel's an animal. It is what it is. He just is. He's an animal. But what I will say is, right now I feel like Jared Wilson and Will Campbell being on the same side, both being rookies, both the first 2 rookies to start in the Super Bowl, I believe, together on the offensive line. Both of them are out of position, in my personal opinion. I think that I know Jared Wilson is a center. He played center all his career at Georgia, and then I think that Will Campbell is better at guard, and that is I'm fighting for that still. Most people are now kind of on that train a little bit more. That's just because I think he could be a long-time All-Pro guard and not a tackle. But that neither here nor there. Let's get off that. But I think they could address the other side, the offensive tackle, because Morgan Moses is older. He is a 2028 unrestricted free agent, so he has a couple years on his contract, so maybe you don't go there. I think that they could add an edge because currently their starting edges are K'Lavon Chason and Harold Landry. I think it's an average group. I don't think it's like amazing by any means. And Chason's also a under UFA, so I think adding pass rush on third down and also maximizing the type of defense that they have to not have to have these guys play the run all the time. I think Cassius Howell makes a ton of sense here because I don't love his arm length. I don't love the fact that I don't think he's a great run defender. I think he's a true DPR, but if you go to a defense that can kind of, shadow your shortcomings, that's perfect. And I think that's what this team does for him. I think that they can kind of say, you look at him and you're like, hey, we need you to rush the passer and we need you to make tackles in space. You can do that, especially if you're not getting natural like tackles coming at you, because they do play true four eyes and, sometimes even head up force that take away those tackles and let him play a little more in space than maybe he did at A&M.
Yeah, and Mike Vrabel's always been a guy, like you said, he's just a grinder and wants it his way, and his regime, you just got to trust above all else. But he loves having depth, especially in the front seven. That makes a ton of sense. But then the Super Bowl 60 champs are where we're going to cap off this 1.0 mock. That is the Seattle Seahawks. Nobody saw it coming, and it happened anyway, and they did it in dominant fashion. Fantastic story. It was a fun season to watch from them. It was awesome to even see them, finish it strong, because a lot of these seasons you kind of see it just kind of end with the whimper, and they just ended with the absolute exclamation point. Awesome year, but they got to follow it up. What are they going to do?
Hardest division in football, earned the number 1 seed. Top 6 defense, top 10 offense, gave up the least amount of points per game in the league, multiple 20-point wins. Just, very few needs on this team. If we're going to really talk about it, like, they have very few needs. They do have some guys with expiring contracts, so that's a good place to start. And then also their weak link on their offensive line was Anthony Bradford, so I think maybe addressing that in this draft would be good. I don't think there's anybody here for that, but I think that would be good. Cornerback is the big one because both Josh Jobe and Reek Woolen are UFAs, and I don't know that you can't upgrade them in this draft, if that makes sense. So I think that would be a big way to go. And then also I think upgrading Cooper Kupp is in order. Maybe not his upgrade, but getting another guy out there that can play at a high level, not named Rashid Shaheed, who's really just a special teamer. So there are two options, I think. We're going to go back to that cornerback board because I think that's the position they go with. It's either Brandon Cisse or Keith Abney, in my opinion. I also think linebacker sneaky. You could go with one of those guys, but I think it's between these two. And we're going to go with the consensus because I do believe Jeremiah and Kuiper both pick Cisse. So we're going to just follow in their footsteps on this one. I think if you're going to talk about an outside corner, here, y'all ready? Long, rangy athlete from South Carolina. Anything ringing a bell? Sounds just like Nick Manwari, right? So why not get his ex-teammate that plays corner instead of safety and let them play together again?
Yeah, and you mentioned just by default, obviously not a ton of needs, but we're just going with what the expiring deals are. And right now, Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, Joshua Jobe, all unrestricted free agents. That said, I don't remember a defending Super Bowl champion having $73 million of cap space, but they do.
Jeez.
So they're going to, on paper, just be one of the scariest teams if they just continue to not only run it back, but they are aggressive in the offseason as well. So, yeah, a lot of fun names and things, but they could definitely just be BPA when it's all said and done after we see all these free agency moves.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was our video. We appreciate you hanging out with us. It was a little long, but at the same time, this is the first mock draft. We got to get through all these teams. We got to talk about all these teams. The next mock draft will be a little bit quicker because I feel like we're going to have the ability to just kind of fly through it and just talk about the players more so than the teams, and we already talked about their needs at this point. But we appreciate y'all hanging out with us. Go like, comment, subscribe. Tell us where we did wrong. Go tell us who your team is and who you would like your team to pick, because obviously I don't always get exactly what y'all want. But we would love to see what y'all have to say in the comments, and we'll see y'all in the next video. It's going to be a little bit of a break because we're going to start doing positional rankings after the combine. So we'll do a couple videos in between there, but that'll be really when we get going.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, again, this is the first official day of the offseason, so I know Emory has killed it on the first two videos on this new channel. But be sure to also be tuning in for Game Time discussions because we'll be doing some fun content there in the offseason as well. Fantasy content, reactions to a lot of moves that take place. We expect it to be a fun offseason, and I can't wait to be a part of that. And it is also always good to talk to him because it's been a while since we've been on the same video together. So
yeah,
I
absolutely.
can't thank you guys enough for tuning in, and we will see you guys on the next one.
Later, guys.